So I thought it'd be helpful to go through the Gemara Pei Zayin and Aleph, Rabbi Chanani ben Akavia's principle over kofifin. We can imagine the balcony as if it bends down to make partitions with some very nice visual aids from Oz V'Hadar. So the Gemara starts at the bottom of Pei Vav Amud Beis. We learned the brayz there that says, Rabbi Chanani ben Akavia Omer, Gezuztra, if you have a balcony or a board, she says it's above the yam, so it extends over some body of water. And the goal here is the person wants to be able to draw water on Shabbos. The problem is a body of water is a karmelis, and it's rabbinically forbidden to go from a karmelis to Rosh Hashanah. This balcony is Rosh Hashanah, so how could he set this up in a permissible way? Says Reb Chanani ben Akavia, if yesh ba arba amos al arba amos, if the board has dimensions of 4 by 4 amos, which Rashi says in terms of tfachim is 24 by 24 tfachim, then, continuing to Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, chokek b'dalad dalad mamali, he just carves out a square hole right in the center, 4 by 4 tfachim, and he could fill up his water through that hole. How does this work? So let's take a look. You can see these pictures in this wonderful sefer Hod V'Hadar from Oz V'Hadar. I'll include a link where you could purchase that. So here is a picture to show you exactly what's going on. So here's our board, 24 by 24 tfachim. He makes the hole right in the center. So why should this be permitted? So the next picture here shows you what we're doing. What we do is, Chanani ben Akavia is saying that we're allowed to imagine it as if these pieces fold down. Which means then that, in our imagination, in this halachic fiction, we have an enclosure. And given these numbers, as we could see, you have 10 tefachim going in each direction. You have the minimal shiur for mechitza of 10 tefachim. Now the fact that there's space between the mechitzos and the water, we know that's not a problem. That's called mechitza tluya, which the Rabbanan said is okay. When it comes to drawing water, the Rabbanan were lenient and they said that's okay. Based on the principle of good achis. So another halachic fiction where we could imagine it as if these physical partitions, here they're really in our imagination, but once we imagine these partitions, we can imagine further that they extend all the way to the water. So we have an enclosure, a Rosh Hashanah, the minimal area of 4 by 4 tefachim, going around this spot, so he can lower the bucket through this spot and draw water. So that's the first piece that we have about Reb Chanani ben Akavia's concept. Now the Gemara says later as follows. Abaye says, Omer Abaye, L'divrei Reb Chanani ben Akavia, he says, Smucha l'kosel b'pachos migimel tefachim. If we have our balcony, our board, is a little less than 3 tefachim from the wall. So let's pull up the picture of that. Okay, here we go. So the board looks like this. So we see here that going this way, it's the same. It's the same as the previous case. You have 24 tefachim, 4 amos going this way. But now let's look from this way. It's much shorter. It's a rectangle here. The width is considerably smaller. He says we're within 3 tefachim. So we could see it's within 3 tefachim of the wall. So what does Abaye say? Tzarech sheyeh orcha daled amos. Okay, we have that length of 4 amos. V'rochva achad asar mashu. And all we need for the width is 11 and a little bit. And then we could work everything out. So how does that work? So let's take a look. Using the picture, it's much easier to see what's going on. The goal is the same. We want to make that enclosure, which it has to be around a minimum of 4 by 4 tefachim. And we need to somehow, whether it's physical or imaginary, make mechitzos of at least a height of 10 tefachim around the enclosure. We need to make that mechitza tluya. So here we go. The way it works is, first of all, the wall itself obviously counts as a valid partition. Now he's going to lower the bucket through here, as you see in the picture. What he does is he carves out. As we could see, he cuts into the board, and he's going to cut how much? Let's just say the space here is 2.9 tfachim. He's going to cut 1.1. So that means we have that square we need of 4 by 4 tfachim. Okay, the next step is, look, we have this remaining 10 tfachim here, because again, the width over here is 11.1, and we cut into it 1.1. So we have exactly 10 left. It's exactly the amount we need. So we're going to fold that down. So this picture is showing you how that's, what happens in our imagination when you fold that down. So that's the opposite side of our enclosure. Here, the wall again. See, the shadow is, the wall is one side, and this kofafin, the piece that in our imagination we bend down, is the opposite side of the enclosure. Then we're going to do some more folding down. So if you look the way they're cutting it away here, we're going to take this piece and fold those down. And this picture is showing you those folded down, that 1.1. And so we have at least partial partitions on these two sides. Now you'll say, but what about this gap? So that's where we apply the principle of lavud. We have yet another halachic fiction here, which says, Halach L'Mishri Sinai says, if you have a gap of less than 3 tefachim, which is the case here as we stated, then we can look at that gap as if it's filled in. So based on that, it's as if this part is filled in. So we have our enclosure of 4 halachically valid partitions, mechitza tluya, and then Godachas will take over, finish the job, and extend that to the surface of the water, and then no problem, he can lower the bucket through that. Rabbi continues, let's say Hoisa Zekufa. Let's say the board is standing up straight. So let's look at a picture of that. So here's a picture of that. The board is standing up straight on supports there. Then what kind of dimensions will we need to work things out? So what does Abaye say? Tzarech sheyeh gova 10 tfachim, and as a height, it needs a height of 10 tfachim, baroch vavav tfachim mishnei mashuyin. The width will need to be 6 and then change, two little bit amounts. In other words, let's say 6.2. At those dimensions, we could work it out. Let's see how that works out. So again, start with the easy part. The wall of the building, the house itself, obviously counts as a valid mechitza. And now we're going to do our folding. We're going to fold this and this. How much? We're going to fold 1.1 tefach here, and this is the same 1.1 tefachim. We're going to fold those so that in our imagination it looks like this. What are we left with? Aleph over here is 4 tefachim. So that's going to be the mechitza opposite the wall supplied by the house itself. And then after our folding, the same as before. Here we have 1.1 tefachim, and this has to be positioned same as before. This space has to be a little bit less than 3, which is by definition, we place this 4 tefachim away from the wall. Right, in this initial picture, you have 4 tefachim. So if you fold this over, and it's 1.1 here, so that means that brings you within lava. It's the same as before. Since Bayes, this gap is less than 3, the principle of lava allows us to imagine as if that's filled in. So you're back at the same place. You once again have mechitza tluya going down. That's 10 tefachim. And then Godachas will take over from there and extend that to the water surface. Abaye continues. Well, this one is not a bayam. Rafuna breder Yeshua. So medes bekeren zavis. Let's talk about if the board is standing at the corner. What does that mean, standing at the corner? So let's. So it looks like this. We're saying if you have, as Rashi describes, the thickness of the board is facing one wall, and we have two physical walls that meet at a corner, and we're attaching the board like so. So the Gemara says, how much do we need in this case? Okay, height of 10, we understand. You need a height of 10 for this to work. But if the width is 2, let's just call it 2.2, then it'll work out if it's positioned from the wall in the correct way. So how does that work out? Let's see. So first of all, where does he position exactly? How much distance from the wall? So again, 2.9, just a little bit less than 3. And then, as the Gemara said, the width of the board is, let's just call it 2.2, and then everything will work out. Why? Because we're going to fold it. We're going to bend that, fold it, with the Chanani Mekavia's concept. When we fold it, it's going to look like this. If you fold it right in the middle, it's 1.1 here, 1.1 here. So beautiful. The remaining gap, well, the gap to begin with between here was 2.9, so you love that. You filled in that gap. After you fold this, the same thing, it's within love it of the wall, so you fill in that gap. And it's positioned such that you end up with 4 and 4, and of course the physical walls of the buildings are going to supply the other 2 mechitzos. So again, we have our enclosure. Halachically, you have mechitzos of a height of 10 tefachim, all the 4 sides, enclosing 4 by 4 tefachim. So it works out in this case too. This leads the Gemara to ask that, okay, then how do we understand the brisa we started with in the beginning? Didn't Chanani say in the brisa that the board needs to be 4 amos by 4 amos? It needs to be a square, we said in the beginning, of 24 by 24 tvachim. Then you could be chokek in the middle, make that square hole of daled al daled 4 by 4 tvachim, and then mamali, fill your water from there. But what do you mean? All of the applications we just discussed are saying that you could take advantage of the physical wall of the house, and based on that, the board itself doesn't have to be that big. You don't have to fold your 4 segments down from the board, because you could capitalize on the walls of the house. So how do you find that case? What case was that referring to? What case was Rabbi Chanami Kavya saying that it needs to be a square of a full 24 by 24 tefachim? The answer the Gemara says is the avida kiasisa. Yeah, there would be a case where you're going to make it that it looks like a mortar, where you're going to need to fold down all 4 parts, and that is where there is no structure that you could take advantage of. So what does that look like? Like this. As Rashi explains, it means that you have a board that is on some kind of poles in the middle of the water. It's not next to any kind of a structure. So the only way to work it out will be if you have 24 by 24, and then you'll fold down the segments like they're showing here to make your imaginary suspended mechitzos, and then you'll be able to draw water through this hole.